Recording now. All right, so just to get us started with our first discussion on the third wave, I decided to take from the introduction to the book as well as take from the conclusion of our first discussion, which was chapter 6? I think. Yeah, chapter 6. And kind of combine those and just kind of chat about how these two pieces bring the entire section together and talk about leadership overall. So the first thing that really struck me was the chart in the very introduction of the book in the foreword that talked about the actual 3 waves of the internet, which I really wasn't aware of because I've always looked at Web 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and now what Daniel Burris, who's a futurist, calls Web 4.0. So I wondered what the alignment was to those components, and then more specifically, taking that Internet of Everything, or the third wave, or what Daniel Burris calls Web 4.0. How does that really relate to the end of the first section that we were supposed to read, where the quote on page 99 said, when you're talking to a bunch of corporate guys about 18 to 20 years in the future, when none of those guys will still be in the company, they don't get too excited about it. So I wanted to think about how do we get specifically educators excited about preparing their students for 20 years plus into the future, thinking about it from the perspective of the third wave of technology, or Web 4.0. And I don't know if any of you want to start talking about it, because I have my own ideas, but I don't want to cloud those, or if I need to make any clarifications on what Web 4.0 is, I can do that.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think as leaders, we have to be able to get these educators to think about the future, in the sense that even though we don't know what it's going to look like, we still have to think about how our students will move forward through into that future. So like you said, the guys who didn't care about 18 to 20 years in the future, people in charge of companies who think like that, their companies or even schools, they won't survive through to the future because they're not being forward thinking. And I'm not exactly sure how we get our educators excited about that, but we have to recognize that we have to figure out a way to get them excited and get them thinking about what's coming in the future, because otherwise our students will be behind and they won't be ready for the future.
And I know that tied in with what I had put on there about, our schools prepared. So when we're getting prepared for stuff, I feel like we're always behind, because the minute we get it implemented, it's already old news. Something new and better has already come out. Like every time we try to implement something new, it's like, I'm already out of date. So it's hard to get our educators excited about that, because it's constantly changing, especially the ones that have been in it for so long.
Is that a K through 12 issue, Julie? Okay.
Yeah, I think mine's probably because I work in K through 12. I think it's one of those, I feel like we're always behind.
Yeah. I'm not sure about, Courtney and Sarah at their universities, but we've never actually had that problem. I don't know what y'all's budgets are at y'all's universities, but we actually really haven't been turned down on any type of technology tools that we've purchased. Like we just purchased Concourse, which is a syllabus management tool that will allow the faculty to manage and edit their syllabus and change it in real time, connect it to the LMS so that anybody can access it 24/7. So I would say at my university, the leadership starts with us as a department, and we have to be proactive. We have to be positive. We have to show them that, this tool will work, and it has to be a foundation, because we don't know if this tool is going to be used 20 years from now, like the question Dana posed, but there has to be a foundation it has to start from somewhere. So I think that it starts with us, and we have to show them that this tool will help, the students going forward and hopefully into the future.
We're drastically different. like at some classrooms I still feel like are living 18 to 20 years in the past on our campus. And it kind of makes me think, like, so we like to refer to some people as road blockers. And they just make it extremely difficult to implement changes or have innovative ideas and like implement them. So we're at this space where people like me are wanting to get where you guys are and like being innovative and building the foundation for moving forward to the future. But then we also have people who are just really apprehensive and I guess afraid of change and not really sure how to navigate what's coming, how to implement technology at all. I mean, we still have, like, some of the classrooms have desks that are so old, and so then it's chalkboards and the instructor just stands there speaking at you, and it's just not a space that's innovative or motivating or encourage. Like, I just remember sitting through some awful classes when I was a student, and they're still like that. They haven't changed since I've graduated either. So I like how you use the word build the foundation. Even though it might not be something that will still be used in 20 years, at least you have people who have accepted a change and are willing to learn something new if something new and better does come along.
I agree with Sarah, and our infrastructure still is ridiculously outdated. We are one of the only institutions of our size that still uses a student mainframe system, and it's physical servers, we hardly do anything cloud-based. We still run huge data centers that take up a ridiculous amount of energy. And up until this year, we didn't have a chief technology officer. That's a new position that we just gained in ITS, and she has done started the process of doing some innovative things, but really her whole vision is on enterprise systems, infrastructure as a service and all of that. So it's really less personal, less what technology can I do to help a student, and more about the campus as a whole.
Was it before? Oh, sorry, Dana.
No. Go ahead.
Oh, mine was just real quick. Was this before or after the budget constraints in y'all state, Courtney? Like, has that always been the case? Like, because I know that Louisiana is having major budget constraints.
We always have budget constraints.
Oh, okay.
We'll never not be budget constraints.
Okay. I just never knew. I mean, just finding out, I guess, fairly recently that y'all are, being impacted by,
One of the main problems, I believe, is we are a research institution. So we get a lot of money for research. That does not mean we get a lot of money for technology focused on education.
Yeah.
Those are two very separate and different sectors of the university.
I got you.
And so I guess I kind of have a unique perspective because I get to see it all over the country, pre-K on up through higher ed. And, I live in a district that I went to a presentation for 9th grade orientation for my daughter for next year. And at the conclusion of the presentation, I went up to a friend of mine who's on the school board and I said, I hope you know that our district is at least 20 years behind where it needs to be. And you really should be preparing for 30 plus years into the future. And so that's not just in terms of technology, because I think the problem becomes that we think about technology as just a tool to do it faster, do it better, do it prettier. And if we think about where the third wave is coming from, or Web 4.0, what we need to be prepared for is a world in which we're not using the web just to consume information, but we're using the web not only to produce new information, but to have the web be able to take that information and really do things for us, so that when my flight gets canceled, that essentially my agent is able to tell me, hey, Dana, guess what? I turned off your alarm clock. You slept an extra 2 hours because I rebooked you on this later flight. I rescheduled the car, and I let them know that you're going to be an hour and a half late for the meeting, and I know that you like this to eat, and so pick it up on your way to the meeting, and it's already been ordered for you. And so if we're thinking about technology in terms of just using it for the sake of substitution, rather than thinking about it through the lens of the ISTE standards, I think that's where the problem comes in. So whether it's a K-12 system or whether it's a higher ed system that I'm working at, in terms of the visionary leadership that's there, it's pretty lacking in terms of transformational leadership. It's almost non-existent all across the board. And I work with some districts that have a ton of money, and they're in a one-to-one situation, and they're providing the best that money can buy, but they're not doing anything transformational with it. So therefore, they're so not ready for the third wave. Or I work with districts that literally have no dollars, they're just trying to get through with federal funding to kind of scrape together money to do different things. And they're trying their darndest to be transformational, yet I don't think that they've figured out how to establish the partnerships that are required, like that the third wave's talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know if this maybe constitutes as democratic leadership, but the powers that be above are always like coming to us and telling us, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Like, for example, OERs. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the open education resources, but my boss came to me and was like, hey, I want you to go to this conference. I want you to attend as many sessions as you can, get as much information as you can possibly get, come back to us. And then so I wrote a report to her. And then what I introduced to her is basically do a pilot study and get the faculty who I know will be interested in it, excited about it, but then also to mix it up and put some faculty that may be a little apprehensive about it and basically get their take on it, bring them back, and then get their feedback and then base their decision on that. So it's just kind of weird to hear everybody like, yourself, Dana, and everybody else, Julie, Courtney, Sarah, it's like, there's just no excitement. And it's just so weird hearing that, because I thought that Lamar was just on the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to everything. But just to hear this type of stuff, I'm like, wow, this is just very, very surprising.
I think more of that, what you're describing, may happen at the director or, assistant director level, but not at my level.
Okay.
So, I mean, like this assistant director I used to work with, I know he does a lot of policy. He's the director of academic IT, and so he does a lot with policy and with the technologies we use, and so he's also sort of in charge of Moodle, and so he sort of dictates what we use in Moodle and what we integrate, I guess. But even that, because the vision of the chief technology officer is to move to an out-of-the-box solution, we're getting rid of our very customized solution and going to something out of the box that the professors are going to hate. And that's something that he doesn't have control over. So I think the culture is probably very different where you are than where we are.
So, and I still have to ask the question then, so open educational resources or Moodle, those to me are not third wave. I mean, those are still, partially Web 1.0 moving into Web 2.0 with some social aspects. Because if I think of it in the 1, 2, 3, 4 version, which really does align with the three waves, I mean, Web 1.0, it's the internet of just information that we consume. And I know I'm a lot older than most of you, but when I went to undergraduate school and my professor said, hey, I got this great thing called email, and And I found all this information on the internet. And when I went to grad school and they gave me an email address, I was like, wow, that's really cool. And could do some research online instead of on microfiche and microfilm. But then moving into that Web 2.0 space where it's social, where things like Moodle started to exist, where you can start having discussions online, or, you know, thinking about it in terms of how we use Twitter in the classroom, or even if you want to use Facebook and that sort of thing. But then in a 3.0 experience where the internet is starting to make sense of what you're doing. So understanding how words in this application and words in this application come together to create something that's meaningful for you. But in this Web 4.0, or in the third wave, where it's the internet of everything. And so if we're still stuck in education, which 98% of what I see across the country is still stuck in a 1.0, 2.0 space, education, and really what he even described in the third wave of education isn't third wave. Like I want to write a letter to Steve Case, because he's not third wave enough in what he's talking about for education. He does a great job, I think, with the food and with healthcare and that sort of thing. But you know, personalized and everything and using data, yes, that's great. But until we get kids solving real world problems, it doesn't prepare anybody for the future.
I think you make a good point, Dana. I know, like what I was talking about, you'd said technology is a substitution. I think that's what's happening, like in our instance, in our district. The principal at the high school that I'm housed at, he wants to put computers in every classroom, which is great. I'm glad he's wanting to do that. I said, but what are they going to do with it? So we're still very stuck, like you said, maybe in the first and second wave. They think they're doing something by providing all this, but what are we doing with it? We're not at the same level as the kids.
I agree with you too, Dana, and I didn't catch that at first, but that's a good point. I mean, he describes Pear Deck and Teachers Pay Teachers, both of which are already, almost 10 years old, and he describes the closing the gap between the classroom and the home. We already do that with an LMS. You know, with Google Classroom, you already get a summary of your child's homework from each class, and you know, stuff like that. So
and I'm convinced it's because he's a business person, so he doesn't really know what's happening in schools. So I'm telling you, I'm writing him a letter, an email, whatever. But I'm totally going to connect with him, because it's like it's not enough. So if somebody's writing about the third wave, about education, he better be writing. Maybe he needs to be into the fourth wave with education. So it's just interesting to me, because I do an activity with teachers where I have them predict 30 years into the future, like what education is going to be like, and I give them roles to play. So there are several different roles. Like they have to be the optimist, they have to be the pessimist, they have to be status quo, and then like the really transformational innovation person. And it's really interesting to hear the differences in the descriptions of what they come up with. And for some of them, it's really hard to think transformationally, which makes me wonder, how do we get more transformational leaders into the classrooms? Because until we do that, education doesn't.
Not even just in the classroom, in the school in general, because it sounds like that's a rare thing.
It is. It is. It's very sad, but it pays my bills. So unless anybody else has anything to say, I mean, I feel pretty comfortable about someone else taking one of their other questions that we had created.
Sarah's question that kind of piggybacks off of this was, how do we get involved stakeholders?
Yeah, and so like
buy-in.
At the bottom of the document, I had a question about what partnerships should be forming to bring businesses and schools and companies into the third wave, because he talked a lot about forming partnerships, how those would be really necessary in order for companies and institutions to succeed. So I was kind of thinking about what are some partnerships we could foresee or predict? Like, what would be some partnerships that make sense and that could bring transformation to our schools and other workplaces?
All right, since this is what I'm going to do my dissertation on, so my company actually, building off the app that we had to develop for Dr. Song's class, I took it a step further, and we actually we put in for a small business innovation grant from the federal government to hopefully get a lot of money to actually develop this app, because what I envision is not only like the app piece that I talked about for Dr. Song's class, because I couldn't do everything for that class, but essentially not just connecting teachers to teachers, but connecting teachers to businesses so that they can help them to say, this is how the content works in the real world, and here are some problems that we struggle with in the real world, and this is the kinds of things that your students need to be solving. And so to connect them through the app, and then have what my dissertation wants to focus on is the value-added feedback that we get from those business partnerships to students to help them improve final products. So thinking about it from the perspective of, if I live in a really tiny community where I don't have any real community assets, other than maybe some social capital, with churches and that sort of thing, but being able to connect with, someone in New York City that is grappling with this in their business life so that they can connect with the kids in the classroom. Because I don't think until we do that, that we get those innovative thinkers. And those are the kinds of partnerships that I want to see start to evolve, because right now I'm teaching a grad class on authentic learning, and my teachers are super struggling. Like, the whole class is scaffolded for their final project, where they have to develop a project to implement in the classroom. And they are struggling to see the relevance of their content and how they can connect to the real world. The first week, I had a bunch of people drop my class because they're like, this is way too hard. I don't know how to do this, because they don't think about being an expert outside of just, I've read the textbook and I'm an expert, but I've never really put this into practice. So they have to start to forge those partnerships. And for me, third wave and beyond gets rid of school buildings as we know it. And it just becomes a bunch of partnerships between, kids, no matter what age, grade level they are, with outside organizations solving these real world problems. So they don't even necessarily have to go to a brick building every day in order to do that.
I've actually thought about that, man. So basically the retail stores, the brick and mortar, it's almost going that way. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm pushing fourth wave here.
We almost need companies that, like you just described, companies that their purpose is strictly to build partnerships between other people. So sort of like recruitment firms, but for partnerships.
Yeah. One company that comes to mind right now is AXI. I don't know if you're familiar with them, Courtney. So they're like education solutions, and currently they have a partnership with Promethean. So they'll sell the Promethean board, but then they also have people who go out from their company and do the professional development. And when I talk to my students about, smart boards versus Promethean boards, I always tell them how, if I have a problem with a Promethean board, I know someone at that company I could call, and either within 24 hours or within the week, they'll have my question answered. Whereas with Smart, I don't even know how I would get a question answered about that company. So I see companies like that being really good at being able to reach out and form those partnerships, whether it be with schools or bringing businesses, like bridging the gap between providing a platform for that business and that school to connect, because they're kind of already creating this community of individuals who go to them because they already trust them for solutions and educational answers.
Do y'all have partnerships with any type of content publishers like McGraw-Hill, Cengage? Y'all have that at y'all's universities?
I don't know. That's
Okay.
a good question.
We'll use Cengage from time to time.
Okay. Well, that's good to know that that's involved in K through 12 and not just higher education. But yeah, we partner with those companies among the others, but just focusing on the content wise, met with a professor probably about a month ago, and just the relationship to where we can call them at any point in time during, of course, business hours, and they will help us along the way with technical support, with the content, with anything that relates to helping the faculty get the content in their course. We've never had any issues. It's just good to have that one-to-one relationship with them.
Yeah.
Well, I know, like in my department, I do all the career and technical. So we actually partner with CEV, and they're an online curriculum. But what they do is they build the curriculum and content for teachers to tie in with real world. So they've already created partnerships with outside companies. Like, for example, my professional communications class, we have the content that prepares the students to get a certification in professional communications through Southwest Airlines. And then we'll do some with the Benz company for floral design. So we have those kind of partnerships. So, and in this company, like what Sarah was saying, I can call them and they're out there giving us training, or they're coming out and talking with the kids and stuff like that.
I think companies who are already doing that, or who are good at doing that, are going to be the ones that will succeed, because people will need lots of support to get from where they are now to third wave and beyond.
Julie, thanks for that resource, because I just opened up another tab in my 50 that are open to take a look at, because those are the kinds of things that I like to see, the synergies between the things. And most teachers aren't designers. I mean, it's pretty evident that they find it very difficult to move beyond the worksheets. So having organizations like that is always great to be able to refer to. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Like I said, in this company, they're great. The main salesperson for us actually lives in the hometown that I teach. So his kids go to the school. So he takes a personal interest in it. And he always listens to the teachers. If something's not working for them, he wants to know what would make it better. And they're constantly trying to improve their products and expand it. Like I said, so it covers all of my different programs, my ag classes, my law enforcement classes, animal science, you name it, all my business classes. We have some type of resource and partnership. So it helps. But getting away from worksheets, that's our biggest challenge.
Courtney, I was really interested in your question about the avoidance of collaboration issues, the one that they talked about, with Apple. And then you asked the question about, does sometimes ending a collaboration become the right choice? So I like that question, if we're not opposed to moving on to talk about it.
I mean, I think ending a collaboration sometimes is the right choice, especially if the goals and objectives of two businesses don't align. If each business is looking to go in a different direction, it wouldn't make sense to continue collaboration. Because one company would have to kind of give up with what they think, where they think they should be going. And that might ultimately not be the right choice. So, I mean, it kind of worked out for them in the end. All right.
Yeah,
At one point, it worked out for them.
I don't disagree. I guess I struggle with the when do you know it's time to stop? I guess when do you try to work through it? Okay, we're going to try to work this out. And this is, I mean, that's something you deal with every day, right? Because you work with people on a daily basis. So when do you try to work it out with this person or this company? And when do you say, okay, this is obviously not working. We need to find different people to work with, a different collaboration. Maybe our personalities just don't work well together, and maybe that's okay too. And maybe acknowledging that. I don't know. What do y'all think? I guess is the most professional or the right way to handle that.
It's just kind of difficult being on the outside of these type of collaborations that occur. I mean, I think it's easy. I agree with both of y'all to just say, hey, when it's time to end it, it's time to end it. But we just don't know what the inner workings are on both sides of those companies. What type of leadership styles do they have? Is there autocratic? Is there democratic? Is there visionary? Is it transformational? We just don't know. It kind of, I don't know. Did it kind of seem like Steve got blindsided by Apple a little bit? I don't know. It just felt like that way. But I don't know. I don't know. It's just difficult.
Well, and I think a lot's different now because they didn't have the means to communicate as like we do now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at, so we always go back to the communicate, connect, collaborate, and community. So if they had communicated more, or if they had the opportunity to communicate more, would he have known what was coming? I mean, if he could have Skyped Steve Jobs, was it Steve Jobs that told him?
Yeah, it was Steve.
Yeah. So like if they could have Skyped, could he maybe have read his expression and kind of have known about it before that final meeting?
Yeah. But
I think a lot has changed with the way businesses collaborate. So hopefully the ability to better communicate with people kind of helps us when making those decisions. Whereas for Steve, it was a phone call. Hey, come to this meeting and be super nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting because he talks about the partnership piece and how important that is in the third wave. And so if we look at, wave 2, where I think there was much more competition and the climate just really wasn't there outside of the competition piece because, I want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. We're into a space where unless we have the partnerships, and those partnerships are going to require really great communication, whether it be, now obviously we have the ability to do it virtually because a virtual communication where I can see you and you can see how I like to use my hands when I talk and what that means. Or if I'm in the middle of a conversation and I roll my eyes and make faces, I mean, we can interpret that differently. And then the climate in terms of how we build that partnership, I think is a lot different. And I think that maybe there's a lot more confidence too in terms of the partnerships that can be built versus I have to get on an airplane and I have to fly out to California to have this meeting and then I leave and I'm not so confident that we've built that relationship because once the door closes, I don't know what's happening versus in today's space where we can actually build a partnership community that is established in order to further our goals in the partnership versus I'm trying to get ahead of you and you're trying to block me in that space. And not every partnership's right, because I think that you have to be able to create a sense of the partnership that we're developing is a credible one, not only in the eyes of the leadership between the partnerships, but a credible one in the space from everyone else looking in to that in order for it to work.
I just don't think that would have worked with him, with Steve Jobs, because he was just known to be, somewhat of an authoritarian. Like the way he made decisions in his company, I don't know. I just didn't see. I think that with every type of tool that we have today in terms of trying to communicate with one another, I'm just speaking in terms of his situation. I don't think it would have worked at all.
Yeah.
Because comparing him to Tim Cook, they're two totally different types of leaders. So I think that it would have probably worked more with Tim than it did with Steve. So I think it's more personable when it came to those two. That's just my opinion.
So, and then does the personalities, are they the ones that actually build the climate of the relationship? So if we don't have the right climate because of the different personalities, then it's just not going to work.
Yeah, definitely.
Thinking about your app, Dana, I wonder how that is going to not just facilitate partnerships, but obviously the hope is that it will make great partnerships, but will that be will you be able to match with a better person, make a partnership, using a computer versus picking your own person? That's sort of an interesting concept for the third wave.
Mm-hmm. And, I think that comes with like all of the computational pieces that come into the ISTE standards. And he talks about in the book, like being able to take all that data from a lot of different spaces and put it together in these algorithms that like output and really know what it is that we want, maybe even more so than we know what it is that we want.
I'm kind of scared of the third wave, I think.
I mean, there are a lot of really cool things about it, but there are a lot of things that you're like, wait a minute. And did anybody read Fast Company's article that came out, was it today or yesterday? It was one of their longer ones, so I kind of did a skim through, but they were looking at how on Facebook in 2014, I think it was Cambridge Analytics that basically went in and did all these personality profiles based on what it is that you liked on Facebook and your different interactions on Facebook and the apps that you had, to produce data that would figure out how everybody was going to vote. And if you agreed to it, you not only agreed to you being kind of the test subject for it, but all of your friends as being the test subject for it. And so in the last couple of years, and more recently now, Facebook has kind of been backpedaling and talking about different ways that they've been handling that information, because it's all that data mining that can figure out what it is that we need, but at the same time, it's a little bit overwhelming to what these capabilities are, and who are the leaders that are going to be helping to ensure that the policy comes through to make sure that the privacy issues aren't compromised. Because maybe it's because I'm a former AP government teacher, but the policy piece really intrigued me as one of the P's here, because it has to come into play, because it's going to look very, very differently.
That's why I posed that question about data privacy.
Yeah, that's right, you did.
That crap scares me so much. I mean, my Fitness Pal, really? People are breaching.
How could you?
Hey, Panera Bread today.
Ridiculous. What'd you say, Julie?
Panera Bread was breached today.
Oh, come on, man. I just went there. I literally went there last night.
Did you order online?
It boggles my mind.
Because everybody needs to know what kind of sandwich and soup you like, Quentin.
Yeah, and how many miles did you run? How many miles did you run on the treadmill today, Courtney? It looks like you're in some fitness deal. Well, it's ridiculous. Like, you think you're doing better for yourself, and you're exercising and getting better and eating better, and all of a sudden, what? When you go search on a website, all of a sudden they're advertising fitness stuff because they breach your data and they know what you're about.
What's the possibility that it's gonna become so widespread it just becomes obsolete?
Well,
yeah.
Or is it just that it's accepted, like it's a trade-off? So, I really want, I want an app like my Fitness Pal, and even more than that, that's going to be able to tell me, hey, Dana, you need to call the doctor right now, or you need to get your butt to the hospital right now because this potentially could happen. I mean, I want to be able to know those kinds of things. So is that an acceptable trade-off for the fact that, a good friend of mine's husband was just diagnosed with head and neck cancer last week. I didn't know what head and neck cancer was, that it was an actual thing. So I Googled it, and Facebook brought up a thing just this weekend on head and neck cancer for me. And I could read all the comments on it. And these people, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did it know that I was Googling head and neck cancer? But at the same time, I was like, oh, it was kind of neat to read these comments because it makes me feel a little bit better about it. So what's the trade-off? I mean, in the third wave, do we become okay with that because the benefits outweigh the negatives?
Yeah. Yeah. What you just talked about, that was included in some of my notes, especially with the Echo and then the Google Home, and
how do you protect yourself? Because at one point it talked about transferring money, like if you got in an accident and the insurance knew exactly because how much it would cost to fix it because of the sensors, so they would transfer the money. But then, like, how do you protect your own assets now?
Yeah.
It's probably no different like with your smartphones. Like every morning when I get in my car, it tells me 18 minutes to work. And I'm like, how do you know where
Yes.
traffic is light? Or if
Exactly.
I'm out of town and not, and it says, if you leave now, you can get to your meeting at 3:00. And I'm like, how do you know what I'm doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's in your calendar, maybe.
Work's not.
Or maybe it's predicted. It knows what time you leave.
Yeah, you can turn that off in the settings under privacy.
But I think that's part of the scary part is like the predictive part of technology, and that technology is getting smarter. It's literally evolving. It, like almost like a person, and that's, I think, concerning. So that kind of can segue, I guess, to my question about when, as a leader in the technology wave, do we have a responsibility towards protecting our constituents, if that's students or other partners, against the negative effects that this technology may cause? So access was one of my examples. That could be data, access to data, access to
I mean,
whatever.
I think we absolutely have a responsibility as leaders. I mean, all leaders kind of have that responsibility, whether they really think about it or not. We can't just share our students' data with anyone. But if we have this kind of technology in place, do we unintentionally allow anyone to just access it?
Yeah, but I mean, what more can we do as leaders? Really, I mean, we have our own policies and procedures in place, FERPA and everything else, but it's hard to prevent that type of stuff. I mean, and are we going to be held accountable as those leaders in some form or fashion? That's,
Well, and
just like data breaches are happening all the time, just like Panera Bread, like Julie said today, and what happened a couple days ago, those high-end stores, that they were breached for their data. So it's like, how do we prevent that from happening?
Well, and do teachers have enough, at least the majority of teachers, do they have enough of a foundational knowledge base to even be protecting students at this point? Because you mentioned FAIRPA and there's COPA and all the different ones, and teachers don't know that. When my daughter was in first grade, and her gifted teacher said in our GIEP meeting, so we're going to start using Edmodo in the classroom. And I said, that's great, but you do realize that according to law, because she's under the age of 13 and so are all your other students, you have to get permission to do that from parents. And she's like, but they're educational apps. And the principal's like jotting down notes, like Farpacopa, like, what is that? She had no clue. And I said, look, I'm not going to sue you, but you need to know, like, these things have to be protected for your kids. And so if we don't even know some of these basic fundamental policies that are out there, I mean, what happens when we get into this third wave, as if we're the leader in a building and we're not even aware of those policies, where does that place us in terms of a level of responsibility to our students, to parents, even adult students on a college campus?
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's not just teachers, it's also principals. The last K-12 school I was at, I did a Chromebook initiative and they had no clue.
Yeah.
No, they were just gonna implement it all and not seek permission from anybody, and didn't think about it, didn't think they needed to consider what their email address was going to be, what their password was going to be, if they were going to, get permission, etc. So I don't know if that, and that was a Catholic school, so I don't know if more training is done for public school principals or not.
Mine was a public school and she had no clue.
Yeah.
I think it
the
comes back to policy. Like, we need policies that address these issues.
I'm with you, Danny. I think that there needs to be a platform for us to provide the knowledge and the content to everybody involved. That's something to think about, that we all need to do as leaders. That's definitely one thing. Yeah, we can share the knowledge with them.
I mean, how many of us in our real lives, we don't read the agreements? I mean, we're just like, oh, agree, click, click, let's get through it. And I never, ever did Pinterest. And because when it first came out originally, you could be sued as a user for something that you pinned if it was in copyright violation. Like, oh, no, not going there. And people are like, oh, yes, I can get all these great ideas, but you're stealing someone else's ideas. And if they don't like it, that's a problem. So most people don't read the end user agreements, which is why Facebook and other organizations just mine all that data and use it however they want to. Yeah. So the more data that we're going to provide in the third wave, the more we have to consider the policies. And are we going to allow the technology to lead us, or are we going to lead the technology revolution?
Sarah and Quentin, I'm interested if at your universities you are limited to the technologies you can use in your classrooms, or if that you have academic freedom. That is a issue at LSU because instructors will put FERPA information on certain technologies that we don't have contracts with, and most of those technologies say that company now owns your data, and so now they own our students' data, technically. Not that I think they would use it, but it is a FERPA violation. But our faculty have academic freedom, so we can't stop it from happening.
Right. I don't know of anything, I haven't heard of an incident where that has ever been addressed. One thing, so a couple of semesters ago, I wanted to start using Google Classroom and showing my students how to use Google Classroom and Google Sites. And it was blocked for me, but it wasn't blocked for students. So I couldn't log in and create a new website or a new Google Classroom, but my students could. So when I contacted the IT department, he said it was because previously professors had tried to use that instead of Moodle, but apparently that's not allowed. We absolutely have to use Moodle. So that's really the only thing I've ever, and he still approved it for me after I explained it. I just want to be able to show them how to use it. I don't intend to replace Moodle with anything. But it's not not all faculty have access to that. That's really the only thing I've ever heard that kind of address that.
Uh,
That is a good question. That would
yeah.
be to find out.
Well, speaking on my side, I know Sarah teaches. I don't teach, but on the instructional design part of it, we're always sharing with the faculty new ways to share their content with the students. We used Quizlet. We used other tools. So there's no real like firewall, if you will, to not use any other tools when they're teaching. We encourage.
Do y'all have contracts with those companies?
No, the only thing that we're required to do if we use tools like Quizlet is to provide the privacy and accessibility policy and service.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, if it's compatible with Blackboard, if there's an embed code, if there's a LTI integration, perfectly fine. So I guess there is a level of academic freedom when it comes to using whatever technology tools that the faculty want to use in the courses. But I do wonder though, like, it's like, whenever we tell them, hey, use this tool, does that come back on us if there are data breaches that occur? Because they just scared the crap out of me when she said that. I'm like, who does it come back on? Does it come back on us because we introduced that tool to them, but they used it,
I don't register my students for anything. They all create their own accounts. So I guess, that's them. That's them making the decision to sign up and put their information on a site.
I think that is one way around it. I think that counts as consent. But if they said, I don't want to create an account for this, you would have to give them an alternative assignment or another way to do that, same assignment.
Yeah.
Another way for like Quizlet, there's probably no student data really in that. Like they can just study the words or whatever without putting in their information. So I think it's mostly talking about the issue comes from my limited understanding. The issue comes when you can link that student to their university in their class. That's when you have a FERPA violation.
Yeah. But it's like if we want this technology that can be predictive and provide personalized information with students, then it has to know something about them. It has to have their data. So then how do we protect them from potential data breaches?
So the way we do it is we have to have a contract. We have to go through a formal contract with those companies and strike out that line that says that they can use our data.
Which comes back to partnerships. It's all about the partnerships.
Yeah.
I know in our district, we went from everything being blocked to everything being open. Yeah. Like our students teachers, we could not get on anything. And then they opened it all up. Kids can get on Facebook, kids can get on Netflix, kids can do everything. They did put something in place that it's called Land School. So teachers can monitor what students are looking at on school computers, but not on their phones and things like that. So we could go in and shut something down or block them out. But almost every one of our kids has a smartphone in their hand. Mm. And so now everything is opened and they're accessing our Wi-Fi. Hmm.
So it'll just be interesting to see as we're moving into the third wave or into Web 4.0, because we're, in my opinion, we're on the cusp. We're not fully there. We've got some self-driving cars and, Google X is playing around with a lot of different things. But as we think about it from the perspective of the different theories that really come into play with leadership, at what point do we think about it from an organizational behavioral theory, where we approach it based on the task and social behavior and what the expectations are? Or at what point do we say it's more of the situational leadership approach where we're thinking about we have to really adapt to our followers' readiness, which I think was a lot of coming back to the first wave and the lessons that Steve Case learned with, when users were actually ready for AOL and that sort of thing. And so how do we use those theories of leadership to really start to plan for the third wave and beyond? And I'm hoping the rest of the book kind of tells us about that. I was very tempted to keep reading, but I stopped.
I would think I would almost have to be situational, especially not knowing. Of course, that's not true, but but of course, not knowing what's going to happen, and what exactly the third wave is going to be. What companies are going to be prominent. So you're going to have to meet those situations as they arise and meet the technologies even as they arise, because we don't even know what technologies are going to be available in this third wave.
Well, we've reached an hour. So I'm sure, Dr. LaPrairie, you don't want to listen to much more than an hour of the five of us talking to one another. So unless anybody else has anything that they want to say kind of in conclusion.
I like the book.
I do too. Like a trip down memory lane. Like I remember when all this stuff first started.
I just don't remember. It all hits me like crazy. I mean, I did not see home automation coming. I did not see, Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I mean, it's like the email. I don't even know. I was so young, but it's crazy. But I'm gonna go back to what Courtney said. We just don't have no clue what's gonna happen in 2020, 2023, 2025. Are we going to be behind the wheel of an automated car? Hopefully that does not. We don't, face the same situation that Uber had with their fatality. But it's just like it's scary. But yeah, we got to meet it head on and make decisions when they actually happen. But I am a what? Home automated. I don't want to say her name, but I'll whisper Alexa because I have it in here. So it's scary. But I am a consumer. It's just now that we're discussing this in depth, it's kind of scary.
And I got mad at Alexa this morning because she couldn't answer my question. She's like, "I'm sorry, I don't know."
I am.
You're supposed to know.
I don't like talking to things, so like I don't know. I have this weird thing about people listening to me talk.
Good for you, Sarah.
I hate when people listen to me talk on the phone. I don't know why. So if I can, and it's not that I don't like talking to people on the phone. I just don't like the fact that someone else can only hear I don't know. I can't explain it. So like having to speak to something, like, no, I don't want that.
She just likes to randomly say stuff in my house. Just out of the blue, just random stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, so on that note, shall we end the conversation, and we'll pick it up next time with chapter 7 on the rise of the rest through the end of the book.
Sounds good.
When do y'all think?
I'll tell you what. I'm going to stop the recording now, and then we can kind of hash out when we're doing that, so Dr. LaPrairie doesn't have to listen to that. All right, we're recording. We're ready for the second half of the book. And just because right before I started to record, Julie mentioned that she liked the first half better than the second half. So I think that's a really good place to start because I'm kind of on the same page with you.
Yeah, the first half was very exciting, and then it felt like it just went downhill, kind of. It was depressing.
Yeah, my exact comment that I wrote in our Google Doc was the second half of the book was much more depressing than the first half that was more optimistic.
Chapter 7 and 8 weren't too bad, but then after that, it was just kind of like, oh, this is really sad.
Yeah, and so, you know, I thought about it in terms of being sad and being depressing. You know, it in the vein that he started from this optimistic perspective and moved into a place where we're all like, oh great, the United States is going downhill, we're not retaining our talents, you know, some of those things that we know in the back of our mind, but when someone puts it in print like Steve Case and makes it sound like it's kind of gloom and doom, you know, how do we get our leaders of the third wave, and I think more impactfully in education, because we have to start with education, how do we get them to focus with an optimistic approach that is, and I pulled out a couple of the words from the book. On page 159, he talks about it being non-polarizing. And on page 185, he talked about being nimble and strategic. And then on page 202, he mentions to execute with precision. So I try to pull all three of those pieces together to think about, you know, how do we get our leaders to act in such a way that brings us into a much more optimistic place that has those three components. And everybody's scrambling to look at the pages that I mentioned. Sorry.
I think it starts with the culture we have of education, with the mandates that our teachers are given. You know, they're given those types of mandates that drive standardized testing type teaching often, because that's how they're often evaluated. So what if they weren't evaluated in that fashion? Or what if our kids weren't evaluated in that fashion? And we change the culture to be more in line with you know, entrepreneurial spirits or project-based learning, or you know, those types of ideas.
You led me to what I was going to say about the project-based learning, because like, I mean, not being in the K through 12 realm, like how open is it if the teacher wanted to take their class to, let's say, a coding session at Apple's store? Like, is that allowed?
I know from like from my standpoint, being K-12, like I was saying today, we spent the whole day doing state testing. You know, the whole school shuts down for a test that we gave today, a test that we have another one on Thursday, we have 3 more in the first week in May, and everything just shuts down. From my department, we don't really use textbooks. Most of our learning is project-based learning, and when we want kids to go on field trips and do those hands-on, I encourage it. I mean, that's the high school level, and our district's pretty open to allowing us to do that, but I know it's not that way everywhere.
Yeah,
It's pretty unique.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends. So we started state testing today too, only we have it for 3 solid weeks. It's not spread out. And you're right, everything shuts down. But from the perspective of taking kids somewhere, I think we really have to look at the connectivity that we can do it online, because at least when I was in the classroom, I had to budget for field trips the October of the school year before I was planning on taking those field trips. And it would cost me $300 just to go 1.5 miles down the road, because you need the school bus. So it wasn't always realistic or feasible for those pieces. But, you know, how can you bring the community into the classroom, you know, to do it virtually, or to do it in such a way that you actually physically bring the people in. But I would say for those of you that are at the university level, I mean, it's still a question of, doing authentic learning in that space too. Because, when I go down to one of my university clients next month, we're actually looking at planning a PBL conference for higher ed, because they're trying to really be cutting edge on that, but trying to get professors to see past just the lecture is, it's just a daunting task. I mean, it's a really, really daunting task. And so if education moves slowly in K to 12, it really moves slowly in the higher ed space.
So that kind of leads me to what I wanted to talk about, was how not only what unique programs could universities offer, but what kind of skills do we want students to graduate with that would help them become better entrepreneurs in order to be successful in this new third wave environment. But also, I was thinking, should we change the way we offer degrees? So, I don't know how it is everywhere else, but for us, pretty much the freshman and sometimes the whole sophomore year is devoted to general ed classes. So English, math, biology, all that other stuff that all majors take. And I sat in a general education meeting one time, and they kind of talked about, what objective isn't the right word. What should all general education classes do for students? And their mindset was sort of, some of them were of the mind that those classes should help them build communication skills, and some other things that could lend them to whatever major they actually were. But I feel like most of those professors are of the mindset, I'm just going to sit here and lecture about history. And a lot of our students get left behind because they're not good at history, they don't care about history, they don't see the relevance to what they want to do in the future. So I was thinking about, how could the way we address general education classes change? What other classes could we offer that would help students acquire those other kinds of skills, like leadership and business and economics and even law and politics, which he talked about a little bit, how a leader had to be able to navigate that space in order to ensure that their company would be successful. And so I've kind of been thinking about that constantly since I've kind of read the last few chapters, I think general ed needs a giant change to it because, like you said, it's really hard to make professors see things differently. They just want to stand there and lecture. And as a recent former student, it's really frustrating. And also as an educator, it's really frustrating to me. So that's kind of been on my mind recently now that I've kind of read what he had to say. So
yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with you, especially coming from the university setting. I looked up today that surprisingly we're part of the National Advisory Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, along with I think 20 something other schools. And we've had that since 2010. And let me just look up a couple of things that we've done. Help small technology businesses by providing resources and connections to enhance the economic development. So I think that going along the lines of what you said, I'm definitely in agreement to overhauling the core curriculum at all the universities. We have to tailor it to, the world that we have today. We can't just keep giving them the same old courses all the time. I think that maybe a focus group at the new student orientations, actually getting in some fresh ideas from the incoming freshmen, see what courses they would like to take. That could be maybe a start to see to make those changes. I know that, of course, it's hard to get professors to jump on board, especially the tenured professors who just don't care. And it's I'm about to retire. I really care less where this course goes. I'm about to go sit on a beach somewhere or something. But I think that just thinking about the years when I was a peer advisor, the same old routines there, just going to the different departments, taking a group of students, getting them registered for the math and the science. And I'm I wasn't really thinking about the technology courses, but now being on this side of it, reading his book, I think that would be a good initiative to take as far as getting the students involved, seeing what type of courses they would want to take, and pretty much go from there.
And even so, we have a degree called it used to be called general studies, but now it's called
Oh,
interdisciplinary
yeah.
studies.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it tends to be students who are like, I want to go to college, or my parents want me to go to college, but I have no idea what to major in. So
Yeah.
a student who graduates with that degree, I'm not going to say they can't find jobs, but they don't have a degree that's specialized enough for them to find specific jobs. And so then even if they want to get a master's degree, they kind of have to play catch up. So they have to take some lower level courses to bridge the gap. What if we made that degree more focused on, why don't you try being an entrepreneur? Take these classes that help you be a better entrepreneur, and then maybe you can do something with that interdisciplinary studies degree. It's really interesting. Yeah, so yeah, that degree is just like, take these random classes and now you have a college degree, but you can't really do anything with it.
It doesn't give them any skills.
Exactly. They have lots of lower level knowledge about random things, but nothing that connects it all together.
Well, so I think that it becomes difficult to navigate the policy at the collegiate level to make those changes. So some of the first steps has to be with, as hard as it is, with the individual professor saying, okay, maybe this isn't what you want to do, and maybe you need this to be well-rounded, but we're going to work on some of those skills that can be applicable to the real world outside of the classroom within my course content, and work on the collaboration pieces that you do and working within the community. And, there are different innovation degrees. I just did a Google search. Most of them are master's degrees in innovation, which is kind of interesting. And I know actually I considered a doctoral program from UPenn, but it was about $85,000, which is why I didn't do it, on entrepreneurship and in education. So I think that there are some higher level degrees that are out there. But yeah, Sarah, when you're talking about, well, I teach freshmen and, this is an intro level course, it's just kind of like, I just want to get through it kind of an attitude. So getting those professors to think about the ways in which it actually connects to the real world. Courtney, welcome back.
And I think there are professors out there who would be open to it. They just need the right leader who will recognize that and provide so much support, because they'll need lots of support to get there, get that mindset.
Yeah, which is why I really enjoy working with North Carolina Central University, because the professional development coordinator for the entire university is a leader and a doer. And she's like, you know what? We're going to get this on board and we're going to make this happen. And you may not like it. So she's kind of like one of these, she's kind of a combination between one of these pace setting leaders, like do as I do and do it now, and a commanding leader, like do what I tell you to do. But at the same time, she's visionary in what she wants to do to kind of lead them down that pathway, which I think is a really interesting combination between all of the different styles of leadership to get it done.
So just going along the same lines of what we're talking about with, I guess the students basically not knowing what they want to do whenever they get to college and trying to help them out, would it be a hindrance to introduce, I'm going to go back to coding and application development at a younger age, to perhaps give them a boost and show them, what other career moves that they can go towards? Like, and if so, where do we start that age group at? Because I have a 7-year-old and I want her to start coding. So, I don't know how everybody else feels, but
well, I think it can be valuable no matter what path you want to pursue. There's tons of stuff out there about how learning not actual coding, but learning the way coding works can lend itself to students like learning how to read, which I find so fascinating. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And I agree with you. It could open up some other pathways that they really didn't see before. Even if in the end, that's not really what they're not going to be a computer programmer in the end.
Yeah.
Explore that.
I just read that there were articles that are not in favor of it because it may hinder their development, their cognitive development. Is that, Dana? I see your face.
No. So it's a really interesting idea behind it, and I had read it a while ago. So again, Google real quickly, and I'll share the link with you. And it's an article on why we shouldn't teach girls specifically to code. And basically the gist of the article is that really coding is like here and now, but coding is not the future. And so that instead of teaching girls to code to compete in, with the boys, essentially, that what they should be doing is really encouraging girls to charge like headfirst into everything and to be inventing and designing and prototyping that would be a new way of doing things rather than coding. So looking into that 30 years into the future. So everybody thinks that coding is so important right now, but really in the next 5 to 10 years, coding is going to kind of be like a thing of the past. And the people that are doing the coding are the ones that will end up being like the low level ones. I'll send you the link.
Oh, please do, because that is very interesting.
And it was written by a woman too.
So what does that say about males, I wonder?
I don't think the actual coding piece is what's the important thing. It's the like learning to think about things differently and problem solve, which is what is so valuable. So I mean, if girls do learn that piece, it's not going to hurt them to learn. I don't know if I agree with the piece that it hurts them. I don't know if it's
well, so
I do see what you mean. I do kind of see what they would.
And I just visited a bunch of classrooms, elementary school classrooms back in December, and they were doing their hour of code. And so I'm walking around and these kids are laying on the floor and they've got their iPads and different things like that. And I'm talking to the students and, tell me a little bit about what you're doing. And basically it was just all very low level, plug and play. And we're going to do this for our hour of code and then we're done. And so we can check off that box and we've taught our kids how to code when really they're not teaching them that computational thinking piece with the ISTE standards and getting them to that place and space where they're being innovative. So it's a really interesting conversation and dichotomy of where kind of we think coding leads us and what's being done in the schools and maybe what the potential is and what they could be and should be doing. I don't know, Julie, do you deal a lot with that with your role?
Well, in our district, we do offer a little bit of coding at the younger age, but like you said, it's very plug and play. They use like their iPads and an Osmos, I think, and it's very basic. But then it never builds from that. It's just something they do for a little bit, they move on to something else. By the time they get to the middle school and to the high school, we actually have, we do career assessments to see what they're interested in. And they do have the opportunity to try different things. And one of our biggest things is trying to get girls into the STEM program, because that's where they keep saying we need more girls in that program and trying to get them interested. So it's interesting in the article that you were talking about, because that is a battle that we have. We'd never have enough girls interested in these things. And so, but like Quentin was asking, we do start it early and they do have a chance to, try different things, because one of the things that we're moving towards is we're going to be graded on if these students leave high school and if they're college, career, or military ready. And I mean, I get graded on how many certifications they're going to walk out with starting next year. Yeah.
So when you say certifications, can you explain that?
And they just released the list today. It's industry-based certifications. So the states come up with 73 certifications that they feel is important that we should be offering. And, not all school districts can offer some of these certifications based on our programs or based on where we're located. But yeah, so 40% of our grade is going to be whether or not these kids have industry certification, or if they've done dual credit classes, or if they're going into the military, on top of have they taken all their EOCs and passed those.
Do you agree with this program?
No.
Okay.
No.
I could tell when you
Because
put
out of the
emphasis on they.
73 on the list, I can only offer 12 of the certifications based on where we're at and what, we're capable of doing. So it's going to hurt us no matter. My kids can walk out with all kind of other certifications, but they're not on that list, so they're not going to be considered.
Those are your political leaders, right? Making those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, always, right?
So it goes back to the policy piece
Mm-hmm.
that you talked about. Hmm. Courtney, was there a particular question that you listed that you wanted to kind of focus on? Because I know you had some difficulties and jumped out of the conversation for a few minutes. Uh-oh.
Oh man.
We lose her?
I can't hear you.
Y'all talk. I'm gonna go get my earbuds.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Has someone's been feeling it to work?
Gotta love technology.
I had wanted to bring back Sarah's question about.
You keep freezing. Yeah, on my thing, you've got a little red by your name, so your internet connection is unstable.
It's not. I mean, it might be, but. Can y'all at least hear me if you can't see me?
We're good now.
Yes.
Okay.
Right now, we can hear you.
So I had wanted to bring back Sarah's question about programs that universities could offer to make our leaders and educators more valuable, and especially since we've now finished this.
Oh man.
Oh, she's frozen.
And she missed that part of the conversation too, that we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't even realize she was gone, because I thought, oh, that was the one Courtney wanted to come back to. And she's being awfully quiet, and it was because she had dropped out.
Well, I know that for me, until hopefully she'll come back. Yeah, because I really liked your question too, Sarah. Because I'm going to go back to undergrad. When we in our last business course that we had to take, we did a project-based learning activity throughout the entire semester, and we were all in teams, and we were in charge of our own virtual business, and we had to. We had a certain amount of money, of course, to use for advertising and signing celebrity endorsers and everything. So it was kind of cool to know that we were in charge of our own domain, basically, to see how successful our business was going to be, and then comparing it to the rest of everybody else. So I know that that's one aspect of I don't know if it was third wave back in that day, but just a program that basically helped us with a lot, just basically running a business for the whole entire semester.
And not only that, but collaborating with others and problem solving.
Oh, we were all different walks of life, had all different types of ideas of where we wanted our business to go. I don't know if Dana deals with that with hers, but man, it was just so many different ideas, and we were trying to bounce off of each other and make decisions. And
I think universities are some programs are trying that. I just don't know if they're as intentional as they should be about facilitating that kind of learning.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested in it because next year we're going to offer to our seniors an online course, and it's going to be virtual business. And
Oh, nice.
I'm looking for any suggestions on what that should look like.
So when you say virtual business, do you mean that it's just a virtual course that is a business course, or do you mean it's a course teaching them how to create virtual businesses.
A course teaching them how to do virtual business.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool.
Really cool.
I went to a conference today put on by the Board of Regents, and it was basically all about OER. That was the hot topic of the day, and it made me think about what you have been doing, Quentin, with your stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they brought up a lot of good and innovative ideas. And another idea that one of the presenters presented was on adaptive learning and using that, and it was all based on online courses, for online courses.
Interesting.
Yeah,
But I still feel like that stuff is 7 years ago. I feel like we
Welcome to Louisiana.
Yeah,
we're both in that same boat right now. So it feels like we are on the back end of it. Go ahead, Dana. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, like, I'm really struggling, Sarah, and I don't know if you'd planned to go this year or not, but for the first year in I think 8 years, I don't know that I'm gonna go to ISTE this year because everything seems so 7 years ago, where people think that it's cutting edge.
I just signed up for that, Dana. This is my first time that I'm going.
No, okay,
Yeah.
don't let her discourage you. It's really fun.
Okay, I've never
am still
been.
going.
I know. Well, let me ask you both. Is it K through 12 like?
It's super K through 12 focused, but there are some things that are focused on administrators, or there's a teacher education piece. I don't know how much like other parts of a university is represented there, but I go because I use some of that in my undergraduate class, because basically the state of Louisiana is pretty much 7 years behind. So FASD is like two years ahead of that, so we're kind of bridging the gap a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun, especially the vendor hall.
Okay.
I just like going and hang out in there and walk around and see all the cool stuff that I can have.
Yeah, but even that cool stuff, I mean, it's just cool stuff to do.
Yeah, you're right.
I've always done it before. I've presented for the last 7 years, and I'm supposed to present this year, or co-present, and I'm just about ready to tell them, I don't know. I mean, my family really wants to go to Chicago for a vacation, so I may end up getting sucked into it for the last year, but I'm having a really hard time with it because I don't even go to sessions anymore. I go and I present, and I network is really what I do. And I think that's the most valuable piece of it, is because you start to build communities, and because we don't always have communities within our own organizations because, people are still first wave, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a little easier to start to find like-minded people, but even within that mix, I mean, there are still some people that aren't even on Twitter. Like I always build into my sessions a back channel Twitter hashtag that I want them to follow, and where we can, collect resources and different ideas. And I'll have a session with 300 people in it, and more than half of them will not have a Twitter account to use.
That's insane.
Yes. And I'm like, this is ISTE, right?
Yeah.
This is ISTE.
And I saw one of the sessions that talks about teaching with Twitter. And I'm like, how do you not have an account?
And I guarantee you, some people attending that session will not have a Twitter.
It's because there's still that Web 2.0 trying to fit into that Web 2.0 space, and they're not moving into 3.0 and 4.0 and into third wave stuff. So you should go and experience it, and you should try to use it for networking pieces for individuals that you can continue to communicate with once you're gone, to build those kind of global community partners. And I have met some fabulous people that way that I still interact with. But even though it's supposed to be cutting edge, I honestly, I don't know that a lot of the presenters really truly understand the ISTE standards for students.
Yes.
Kind of sounding like Steve's book now. You got me excited. Then you brought me down.
I know. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. But it is definitely something to experience, and they do have ISTE emerging leaders, and to try to connect with some of those people, I think is a really good thing. But Sarah's right. You're not going to find a whole lot of university level individuals that are there.
Yeah, I looked and they looked like they had 20 plus I guess university community college focus, but I think that, I mean, it's a technology conference. I'm pretty sure I'll take away something
right
from some of the sessions that are not geared towards universities. Yeah.
And it's Chicago. Chicago's great.
Yes, I've never been, so
that's
I'm
my
looking
second.
forward to it.
Dana,
It's my second favorite U.S. city.
you should come.
Oh, nice.
Hang out.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's so expensive.
I know.
Expensive. And I got to pay for it out of my business, but
I had to pay for it this year. I mean, I've paid for it almost every year since I'm going, but
I'm sorry, you have to pay for it?
yes.
Why? Oh my God.
This is Louisiana. We don't have money we can't have nice things.
Oh my God. Sorry.
It's fun.
This is crazy.
yeah.
So how do we create that buy-in for not faculty and whoever to start making those changes to get to the third wave teaching?
I think for us, we really need some top-level administration and government, not mandates necessarily, but we really need someone top-level to acknowledge the fact that we have to move us forward since we're living so far behind. Because, I mean, I'm sure there are several individuals like us who are ready to be there, but how much power do we have alone? And I mean, I guess if we could facilitate this whole group thing, maybe we could make some changes, but it's not happening.
Told you I'm contacting Steve Case. I'm on. Maybe not this week. Next week my schedule's a little better. But
could you please pay for my ISTE conference registration?
Does it become, and it kind of, I think it feeds into all of these pieces. Is it a tear down and just rebuild? Oh my goodness. From the fact that there are so few leaders out there in the space of education, no matter what level you're looking at. I had a group of teachers yesterday that they're just so disillusioned because they're on administrator number 4 in 18 months, and they have no idea what's going to happen with with their interim principal, if she's actually going to get the job or if it's going to be somebody new. And the assistant principal, who is a phenomenal leader, even yesterday, I mean, I spent 2 hours with him and he was so done with everything. He's like, I'm just ready to walk away and leave education because I feel like I can't even affect change anymore because of the whole, it's New York City, and the Department of Ed is very policy driven from 1950s perspectives. And he's like, I just feel like I can't make any kind of impactful change. Where can I go to do that? Because I don't feel like it's here in New York City, where we really should have lots of resources at our fingertips. And there are,
that typically that at the conference I went to, at least from my university, the people who could have made the decisions to the changes weren't there. So they didn't even hear about why they could save $1 million, why their students could save $1 million a year using OER textbooks, in math or whatever. They didn't even hear that. And So, but I was there, someone who can't make any policy change.
So
Or really has no effect.
how do we get them there?
Well, here's something that I'm doing right now, and it's along the same lines of OER. I know that we had talked before how we set up different meetings with the different companies of the OER, and then I attended the conference. So what I did was, after we met with just our digital learning group, I contacted all three from the companies, and I asked them to present to faculty at the digital ticket conference that we have coming up next month. So what I did was, whenever I meet with the faculty, or whenever the faculty emails me, I kind of throw it in their ear and say, hey, we have our digital ticket conference coming up. Please sign up. We're looking at adopting OERs. So I would really like your feedback and your input. And then I'm also telling the chairs and the deans. So I'm just trying to tell as many people as I possibly can. And that actually just came from me. I didn't talk about that with my boss or anything. Like, she wanted me to find out information about it. So yeah, it's good that we are getting information about the OERs, but it makes no difference if the faculty are not hearing from the horse's mouth. Basically, they can hear from us, but why don't you actually hear from the people who are actually creating that platform? So once we get that presentation going, then we'll come back on Monday and I'll reach out to the faculty and see what they thought, and basically probably meet with the deans, set up meetings with them and introduce it, just in case if they did not attend. So that's something that I'm trying at my university. I'm still just baffled at Sarah and Courtney, because, you know, I knew Louisiana was having funding issues, but I didn't think it was that bad. So
Oh yeah.
Good Lord.
Well, and that's interesting, because he talks about in the book about the rise of the rest in the different areas, and he's talking about New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Yeah, I was
specifically.
like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that exists. Sure. Yeah,
That
totally.
surprised too.
I forgot about that.
So, you know, I've been to New Orleans a couple times. I haven't been down in about 3 years, but is that accurate?
No.
What are you saying? Okay.
And I mean, he wrote this in 2016.
I mean,
that's
for
when he
Like, it was
updated.
there and it went away. Like, I don't know what he was talking about. Where he dug that information up from.
I have a
Can you
hard
put that in your
time
letter, please?
getting on the calendar.
For it to be a educational innovation hub, I was like, really? The Big Easy? That's the educational innovation hub? Like that? Yeah, that was very surprising to see. But I just was doing some notes for the study, and I looked up I think it was Ideal Village and Teach for America, and I think there was another one. I'm like, man, all these companies started in New Orleans. That's crazy. And then just for it to happen from Katrina,
Yeah.
with all the charter schools being developed, I was like, man,
I guess that's where he was coming from. I was surprised he talked about kickboard, because Khan Academy started in New Orleans too. Which I think is a really cool story.
Yeah, that's wow.
Yeah, I don't see that we're an educational. What was it? What did you say? What kind of?
China has what for me.
An educational innovation hub.
Yeah, no, I don't see that. No. Or if it is, why hasn't it trickled down to? I mean, I'm an hour from New Orleans.
Yeah.
So it has not trickled down at all to anywhere else in Louisiana.
Crazy.
So,
Where has info for the rest of the stories come from too?
well, and it makes you wonder. So he talks about the rise of the rest. But is the rise of the rest really then only other cities around the country,
Other specific cities.
and not necessarily smaller communities? I think Courtney's trying to talk.
Oh no. Selling robots.
And I just
We're not laughing at
time
you,
I
Courtney.
switch
We're
to
laughing with you.
now for me,
It's kind of like a synthesizer.
has been sold to a Chinese company, and how he was talking about like loss of talent and or leaving, just like he was.
Dang, I got laws and leaving. That's all I got.
Okay. I got Chinese
Dang it,
company.
man.
I got lots of talent. I heard that part.
I'm trying so hard. Dr. LaPrairie will have a good laugh.
Oh, we appreciate your efforts. Oh my goodness.
Promethean sold Chinese company. Done.
Oh,
So let me just okay. Let me awkward silence. Let me just throw something out at y'all that I was just thinking about with my coworker, and it goes along the same lines of improving campus life with third wave technology. I was having introduced this to the director of sustainability, but it goes along with that with our course. But what do y'all think about implementing smart thermostats in the dorm rooms with, let's say, 10 to 15 students? Because at the dorms at Lamar, and I worked there for like 8 years, every time we would do room checks, their temperatures would be at like 50 degrees. I'm like, why is it y'all want to keep these rooms so cold? So basically, they don't pay for any type of overage fees or anything. It's all included in their fees. So what do you think about adding smart thermostats to their dorm rooms, actually giving them the responsibility to be in charge of their room? Because when they go off for the break or for the holidays, they leave their thermostats on. They don't turn them off.
Yeah.
So would that be some type of partnership between the energy company or Nest or Ecobee and our sustainability office? Do you think that would be a good initiative to introduce to dorm life?
it's a grant you could write for
Yeah.
the lustrous class.
Yes, I talked to her about that yesterday, and it was encouraging to see her face light up. So yeah, I'm definitely going to talk to my director of sustainability and get a grant going, because I'm really I think that would be really cool to see how big of an impact that would make for energy consumption.
Well, if we're in the third wave, it should be an assistant that knows exactly the temperature that you'd like it at, and when you're coming, and knows when you're coming back to your room, and get it the temperature to go up, and it knows when you leave how long you're going to be gone and at what level it needs to drop it to energy efficient before it needs to raise it back up.
Yeah.
Unless it gets hacked and the temperature gets turned to like 105 degrees and we all melt.
Quentin, we do something like that at our school. We did that over the summer. We worked with our energy company, and so they went in and changed all our lights. They took out all our thermostats out of our offices and classrooms, and everything is monitored by our AC guy on his laptop.
Oh, nice.
And, yeah, it's interesting. Because everybody is so different, I get cold easy, so I don't want my office cold, but the ladies next to me are going through the change and they're always hot, and so we can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
And so not having that's tough. Like, I'm fine with it. We've saved a lot of money so far, but yeah. I feel bad for that guy because he gets a lot of phone calls.
Oh, I bet.
Balance everything, but he can do everything from his laptop now.
That's
Anywhere,
cool.
wherever he's at. So there's some pros to it.
Yeah.
Courtney, so maybe you're stable enough to chat now, but you were the one that read about Carly Fiorina, right? I like that random tidbit that you wrote on there, talking about how they tried to keep the AOL Time Warner merger secret, because if not, then it would be leaked what would happen. And then, the story that you read for your leadership bio, I'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about that if you're able to.
I'm cringing right now. Come on, Courtney.
Struggle.
Man.
I wonder, Courtney, if you dropped out and jumped back in, what would happen?
Let me ask you about this though, Dana. Since you have your own company, let's just say I come on board.
If I can talk.
Or any. Oh, there we go, Courtney.
Am I able to? I'm talking.
It worked for the first 3 words. Yeah, Courtney, I would maybe try dropping out of the meeting and then getting back in, and it might it might help.
So okay, if you say so. Leave.
That was the only thing I understood.
So Dana, while she's doing that, would you be opposed to, I guess, new employees or current employees, everybody involved, sign a type of non-disclosure agreement to prevent these types of things from happening? So
it's really interesting because my one partner and I were talking today, and so all of you know Jill. She's no longer in the program, and she just is a very, very quick side note. Her husband was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, so she's been dealing with a lot of issues with that. And so my other partner and I were talking today about some different things that we're working on now. And with her semi-removed from the picture right now because she has to deal with family issues, we're trying to think long term, how do we best support her, but how do we also keep the business moving forward? And one of those pieces that we've talked about is bringing on new individuals. And we were trying to think of some very innovative ways to kind of screen and to make money at the same time while we're doing that, and to go through this process. Because when we were in Forbes a couple of months ago, we just got a deluge of inquiries like, can we come work for you? And we're like, yeah, okay, so you want to come work for us, but we don't know anything about you. And someone might look good on paper, but can they actually get into a room and can they work with teachers and be effective? So we were talking about what that looks like, and the process that we were discussing. One of the big things that we were talking about was, okay, we got to make sure that the way in which we do this is so that people can't actually come in and just take what we're doing and then go try to replicate it, because it's a very, very fine line. So at what point, because this book has really made me think about the whole partnership piece, because at what point do you start to reach out to try to build those partnerships so that you can grow and affect more change? But at what point are you a little like nervous about that because it's proprietary stuff that you have? And I'm just and teachers are notorious for, I'm just going to take that. Like, I'm going to take it and I'm going to use it and I'm not going to give you any credit for it. Jill and I just a couple of I don't know, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, we did a thing, and somebody that was in the audience I've known for a very long time, and she sent me a message and she's like, hey girlfriend, what's up? Do you think you can share your whole presentation with me? Because that was really fabulous. I'm going to do that with my staff. And I'm like, no, no, it's how I make money. Like that's not how it works. So it's a super fine line. And I'm like, okay, what can I learn from what he did? And by no means are we AOL type level company right now, but I don't know. I've done 1099 work with different organizations that have said you need to sign this non-disclosure, this non-compete. And I'm like, well, then that's really in violation of 1099 laws, because now you're treating me as an employee. And so that federally, that's illegal. I don't know what the right answer is. And that's really something that Tim and I are struggling with now, to figure out, how can we be industry leaders, form partnerships, but at the same time, it was towards the end where he was talking about, it's not always about making the money, but it's about doing good. But at the same time, it's about your livelihood. So,
I mean, sometimes it is at the end of the day about your bottom line. You do want to do good and, feel good about your work and help out, but you gotta make a living.
Right. But if I really wanted to make money, I would not be in education. I mean,
yeah, I got you.
So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Somewhat. I just wanted to see how you would be able to combat this or prevent this from happening.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll tell you, we have, as a trio partnership, we have an MOU that was written up by an attorney that we sat down and talked about different things. So I can't say that I want to go, somebody asked me to go work with them. And, that's something that I just want to kind of do on my own. So I'm going to go do it on my own. And since I've helped develop all these materials and processes through Project Dark, I'm just going to go ahead and use that but reap the benefit for myself because it's in violation of the MOU. So even within setting up the partnership, because you've got 3 very distinct personalities and different leadership styles, and trying to communicate, being in 3 different places, and to build a viable company. I mean, it's been 4 years of a lot of hiccups, missteps, and lessons learned, but coming out of it better in the end too. But yeah, Courtney, if you're able to talk now, it would be great to hear about your piece that you read.
Y'all are cutting in and out, so I doubt y'all can hear me.
Yeah, you're still coming up red.
Cutting in and out.
Well, but I'll try.
Yeah, we can't hear anything now. Since you're on your iPhone, are you on Wi-Fi or are you on?
No, because I'm on 4G, but I guess there's something going on in my area.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably what it is the 4G piece. That came through really clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Just that part, huh?
Hey, Courtney, I would run with it right now because you do sound good right now.
Okay, so someone leaked
Okay.
Someone leaked the HP Compaq merger. Carly thinks it was someone on the board, and so that pretty much blew up their whole scheme, I guess, or their whole plan. And that merger, like many mergers, meant additional layoffs, which they had already laid off people in the summer. So the culture of HP at the time the merger went through was really tumultuous, and Carly was the new CEO at that point. So it was interesting to see how, even though the AOL Time Warner merger wasn't leaked, how a similar thing happened with the cultures not being compatible, I guess, with each other. Carly goes into a lot more detail about the things she tried to do to help with the culture than Steve does. I just feel like he kind of said,
oh, the culture sucks, that it is what it is. But Carly went through a lot about how what she did to try to make it better.
And was she successful?
Well, if you Google her, no one likes her. She has a lot of bad press. A lot of people call her the worst CEO ever. But from what I read in her book, I mean, she was ultimately fired from the position. But from what I read in her book, from her perspective, I would say she was. Now, I guess you have to understand that she's a little bit biased too. But yeah, a lot of, I was surprised at how much bad press I found about her.
What made you choose her, out of curiosity?
Really, I was just looking for a female in a technology-rich environment. And she also has another book that's specifically about her leadership journey that I bought too, but I didn't have time to read both. And I just thought she would be interesting. Now she's in politics and she runs a nonprofit.
Yeah, I knew she was in politics now, but I really didn't know her background story.
She started at AT&T doing, nothing really, and went through management program and just worked her way up. So it was an interesting read. I enjoyed it.
That's interesting because you said she worked her way up through a management program, and I kind of all the stuff from the beginning of the semester, looking at the differences, or at least I did, the differences between managers and leaders. And, I wonder if that had any kind of impact or bearing on how she handled the situation. I don't know what anyone else thinks, but it seems to me like Steve's visionary leadership style was so far misaligned with he called them mini fiefdoms, and the leaders within those mini fiefdoms at Time Warner, that it makes me wonder. So if you're looking for those partnerships, do you look for someone that's aligned in terms of leadership style, or does that also break apart? Because if you've got these two really visionary leaders, then do they clash because their visions are different and they're kind of fighting for power, or how does that work?
I guess we would have to dive into other companies that have merged together and see if their leadership styles were successful or not. But I did feel bad for him because he had these visionary ideas and he wanted to buy this company and that company. And I don't know. Did the vetting process, was it not thorough when you met with Time Warner at that time? I don't know. Was it just him? Was it a team of people? There have to be more mergers that we would have to see if opposites attract.
Yeah, because I read about Warren Buffett, and so he's the kind of leader that people come to him and they're like, "Please buy us. We want you. We want you to buy us and bring us under the Berkshire Hathaway name because of the things that you can do for us." And he basically, he walks in and he's like, "Okay, so that's what you want me to buy you for? Well, either A, I don't want the company at all and I'm just walking away, or B, I'm gonna name my price and don't try to negotiate with me because this is bottom line. Like that's all you're gonna get from me, and you try to negotiate it. I'm either gonna walk away or I'm gonna offer you less money." So it almost becomes, at least for me, a struggle within myself to say, okay, how do you become a leader that doesn't have Steve Case issues, or or how do you not be the person that gets Googled and you're the worst CEO ever, kind of thing, and whether we're talking on a big level, or whether you're talking at a smaller university, a larger university, or in a small K-12 or larger K-12 district. I mean, how do you become the leader that doesn't end up, going from the front page to the last page? How do you build those partnerships to make it happen? How do you work with policy to enact changes?
That was kind of the
Project
question I
assigned.
had, was should a leader diversify themselves, or should they be really good in one skill set? And I think that's kind of a similar question as to what you're asking.
I mean, I think maybe one skill set may have worked in the past, but in today's world, there's absolutely no way. I mean, you need to be versatile in a lot of different skills. I definitely don't want to just hone in on one and not, learn other skills. That's just, I'm not going to be able to market myself as much as somebody else that may be coming in and speaking the same language as somebody else.
Yeah, and it's interesting within the work kind of that we've been doing in this program, like everything's following the ADDIE model. And I don't know if any of you get the updates from, what's the organization we had to buy the book for Dr. Lee's class last summer. I can't even remember the name of the organization now. Anyway, I get updates on all their new books, and they had a book in the last couple publications that I got that was leaving ADDIE for SAM, and basically advocating for a more agile way of developing. And then I'm reading this book right now, Sprint: How to Solve Big Problems and Test New Ideas in Just 5 Days. And so they talk about sprinting instead of doing agile focused work. So it's just really interesting, kind of the evolution, and at what point do you pick a skill set? So I only focus on the ADDIE model, or I only focus on SAM, or I only focus on Sprint. And when does that leave you behind, so that you're not ready for third wave?
Did they give an example as to what they implemented?
For which
for
one?
like the way they like the 5 ways, like what's one of the 5 ways?
Oh, in Sprint?
Yeah.
So basically it's a 5-day process where you first have to identify the challenge that you want and set your long-term goals. And
So to take bits and pieces from the model, from the ADDIE model?
No, it's basically, it is, and I'm only on day 3, so I'm not fully there. I haven't gone through all full 5 days, but essentially they want you basically begin with the end in mind. So what is your goal? And you kind of map out what you want to do, and you sketch ideas, and then you have to make a decision on what idea it is that you want to do, and then you prototype, and then you test. And then from the test, you learn what you need to change to go through that process. So it was started from the guys at Google, basically Google Ventures, that started the whole model. And it basically says that brainstorming is pointless, which I mean, I've known for a long time through some different other things, but they have a new approach to get ideas out on the table. But also, in order to make this work, you have to have a leader. They call them the decider. And so that leader may not be the CEO of the company, or the president of the university, or the superintendent of the school, but it needs to be someone that can ultimately take everyone's ideas and make a decision from that, rather than rather than trying to put it out to everyone and kind of, you can talk about it for days and hours ad nauseum and not actually get anywhere. But if you take 5 to 7 people in a room, you can get things done pretty quickly, as long as you at the same time bring in kind of experts to give you feedback through the process. But at certain times, and it's really interesting because they don't allow cell phones or computers through like 90% of the time that you're in there to do it. But so far, it's been a really interesting read. Really good.
I think we've reached a natural pause in our discussion.
Okay, so I am gonna stop the recording.